Hey guys, quick little announcement here from Fishing the DMV. Our Weekend Warrior Club membership on Patreon is nearly full. There are only 18 spots still available. Once these spots are gone, they're gone, and I'll be closing the club to any new members until 2026. At that point, you can try to join again, but it'll be at a higher rate. So get your rates locked in now, and you'll gain access to our 5 fishing tournaments each year for Patreon members only, 5% off your orders to Jake's Bait and Tackle, 10% off your order to Tiger Crankbaits, 10% off your orders to Catoctin Creek Rods. You'll gain access to our private Facebook group community, loads of members only content, and of course, ad-free, commercial-free episodes of the show. You get all this for $6 a month, which is less than a pack of Cincos or a jackhammer chatterbait. Lock in these rates now because in 2026, I'm going to be increasing the rate to new members. And again, I'll give you an extra one here. I'll give you 8% off if you buy the membership for the year. So that'll be $66 for all of this value. There are only a few spots left, so hurry up and check out the link in the episode description. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and a real treat for you guys. A great legend in the kayak world and also a native to the West Virginia area. Jody Queen, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I am glad to be here, buddy. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love conversations with people, and a lot of times people will ask me before they come on, it's like, oh, we're going to talk about baits or whatever. And I remember when I had on one of the guys for Nico, and he told me how he used to be like a fur trader and then was flown to Japan, learned Japanese. I'm like, hold on, we're not talking fishing. We're going to spend the first 30 minutes breaking this down because this is cool as shit. And that's what we did. And he didn't think it was cool. And I was talking to you before we got started here. I was like, my God, you have lived multiple lives, like Ernest Hemingway, a professional angler. This is wild.
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, man. And I just never was afraid to try anything. Anything that popped up, if I felt like I could learn it, I would learn it, and then I give it 100% everything I try. So it was either fail or do it, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to learn enough things to do that where I was successful with most of them. So now I found myself where I really wanted to be all my life. I remember when I was 12 years old, I seen a picture of Denny Brower on a Wheaties box. And that was just the greatest thing I ever seen, and I told my mom and dad then, I was like, one of these days I'm going to be fishing just like that guy. Mm-hmm. And, the boat world was never really kind enough for me I grew up pretty poor and just couldn't get into it, didn't have the funds, couldn't afford a boat. There was always something that kept me from actually getting into the boat side of things. So I just bided my time, I guess, and I wade fished all my life, hit all the creeks and rivers in West Virginia, everything from the north to the south pretty much. And then when the kayak fishing came along, I knew that was my chance. So I was 50 years old when that happened, 49, I think.
You have a lot of life and stories we got to get to before I think we can even get to the kayaking world. Yeah. West Virginia native.
Yes, sir.
You're growing up doing streams and everything. And generally speaking with West Virginia, it's someplace I would like to cover more with the DMV, but there's just, it's so, I don't even know how to explain this. It's very rural and the fishing community is very niche in certain isolated pockets. How did art and fishing kind of manifest as a kid for you?
I mean, I've always drawn, always had an affinity for pencil drawings and painting, and I just always liked to do it. And I was really encouraged by both sides of my family to do that. I have artists on my mother's side. I have some really great artists on that side of the family, and they always encouraged it. They were around when I was growing up, and they'd give me pencils or paint sticks or whatever, and I'd just go mess around with them. And so I've always had a place in my heart for the art side of things. And then on my father's side, when I was growing up, we had a small creek in front of the house, and I can remember my earliest days getting on his back as we waded through some of the deeper holes that I couldn't go through. We dig our own bait out of the banks, and those are my earliest memories have been in the water, and this is something I loved. It stuck to me really hard, and I just continued to do it throughout my life and never stopped. And people thought I was obsessed with it, but it's just one of my favorite places to be. Is it was in the water, and did it all my life. And then like I said, I was telling you before we started this, I seen my first kayak, and that's where I knew that I wanted to cover more ground, and that's how I done it. Cover more water, actually. But when the kayaks come along, and these companies started putting out targeting fishermen and anglers with boats that would allow sitting on top and the good drainage, and they started getting more and more stable, and then these people started turning their eyes toward tournaments, and then when I seen the tournaments pop up, that was my way in. I knew it once I won my first tournament, I wasn't never turning back. So
now,
I'm still here today.
While the tournament fishing is going on, and you're getting more and more addicted, let's just say, to kayak fishing.
Yeah.
You had this other thing going on, which is absolutely, and I have to just share a picture here because, oh my God, this is absolutely stunning work that you're doing. And I think you said it was graphene, correct?
Yeah, graphite pencil. In the 1970s, we had lead-based pencils, and there was a big uproar about lead being in the paint, and they took the lead out of that, and they took the lead out of our pencils. So all pencils made today are made out of graphite. So, but I use mechanical pencils and really fine mechanical pencils. Some of my leads are about the size of the human hair in order to get those really tight lines and get the darknesses. I order special order pencil leads from an art consortium, and they send me my pencil leads and allows me to get the darks. And it's layers. I do it in layers. You go through and you do a light layer, and then you do your dark layers and make it darker and darker. You just keep going over it and over it and over it to get all your darks. So you start light and go as dark as you can by layering pencils, by laying the leads.
When you say you do it in layers and I guess stages, is this all in one sitting, or when you're working on a piece, is it you have to walk away just to clear your head?
No, yeah, you can't do it in one sitting. The picture you have on the right of the young lady with the horse, I think I've got about 80 or 90 hours in that picture. The chicken right there, I probably got maybe 35 or 40 in it. And I've got pictures. I've got one picture that I know I've got well over 100 hours in. But
we can also, let me see, I think I got another one here. I got to go through, guys. I mean, this is breathtaking. And then water reflection just seems like it's insanely hard.
Yeah, it's different. You got to remember everything's opposite, and it pretty much mimics what the subject matter you're drawing, but it's got a little warp to it. It's different.
And when you're doing this, could you tell the story again that we're talking about before we recorded? Like you went from doing art, and then you became a museum curator and traveling to Key West selling art. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah. No, about 15 years ago, my wife, I don't know, are you familiar with Seneca Rocks?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, she climbed Seneca Rocks, and she was always, climbing, hitting hillsides and climbing rocks, and she free climbed some and she belayed some. But we were, I had moved to Florida and started a business down there, and it was during the housing bubble. And when it popped, then we came back, and she was a general manager she was basically a fix-it girl for Applebee's restaurants. So anyway, we were at an overlook here. There's a mountain that runs down called East Mountain here. It's about we were up about 3,800 feet up there, and she was walking along the ridge and tripped, I guess, on a tree root, and it sent her over the edge. She fell about 30 feet, and it almost killed her. We helivaced her out of there, and she was in a coma for a while. And after that, we got her back to Princeton, and we were pulling her out of the back of the ambulance. I'll never forget it. The wheels locked down and it jarred her, and her eyes popped open. And the first thing she said to me was, "Am I in Mercer County?" And I knew she was back then. And I just looked at her and said, "Welcome back, baby." And when they transferred her from Roanoke, and we got her in a room in Princeton down there, and I can never forget the first morning we were there. The nurses came in with a toothbrush and a hairbrush and a washcloth, and I'll never forget the look on her face, because the nurse said, "Today we're going to learn how to brush our teeth. We're going to learn how to brush our hair." And my wife just looked, Vicky, she just looked at her like she was crazy. She said, "I already know how to do all that." And the nurse looked at me, and I said, "I tried to tell you all." She came back when we pulled her out of the ambulance, because they thought they were going to get a vegetable, and she was going to be in a wheelchair for years. The doctors told me, and I said, "I don't care. Just I want her back. Just whatever you give me back, I'll take it." And but anyway, I had to find a new revenue stream. So, and I'd always drawn and fished, and I needed to have something close to home where I could take care of her and still try to make some money. So I picked up a pencil and pulled some books out. I ordered some books on the internet, to get me refreshed with, give me some techniques and stuff. And I put together a body of work, went to a local gallery in Princeton, which is about 15 miles from the house here, and showed my work to a woman down there, and trying to hang my stuff in her gallery. And she loved my work and gave me the name of an artist that was opening the new gallery. It hadn't been built yet. And I took my work to him, and he loved my work, and volunteered there. We got a 501c3, and then I started building that gallery. And in the wintertime, I would leave and go south for about 5 or 6 years. And I went from Key West all the way to Georgia. I did art shows.
Wow.
I did art shows all up and down the coast, from Naples to, Sarasota, all the way up into the Big Bend area, all the way up into southern Georgia, and also all along the East Coast, Vero Beach, and just did all the art shows. And that's the way I made my living for about 6 years, I guess.
That's got to be brutal.
It was, you take chances, but after a while, you know that you have to have these large pieces that you're going to put $3,000-$4,000 on, and you know that you're not going to sell one of those every show. So you learn that I've got to have some middle price stuff. I need to have some smaller stuff, and once you learn what people are looking for, what you can sell, and what can sustain you, the subject matter and all that, then you can make some money at it. I mean, you're not going to get rich unless you hit that one thing that you draw that everybody wants, but you can make a living doing it.
How hard is it as an artist to be, this is what I want to draw, and this is what I should be drawing because it'll move?
Yeah. I mean, that really comes into play. Like if you're doing the art shows and stuff, there are some things that you want to draw that aren't going to sell, but you're just interested in it. So, but you still draw those things when you get a chance. But when you're on the road and you're doing that, you try to stick to subject matters. If I'm selling on, say I'm down in Naples, I'm going to do sunsets and palm trees and, small pictures, for people who have boats. So you'd be surprised how many people live on boats that come to the art shows down there, and there's no wall space. So I was drawing 6x9 pictures or 4x8 pictures, and those were small enough to put on their boats and stuff. So you have to learn your market.
Interesting.
But you still have time to draw the things you want to. And that's where most of the stuff that I wanted to draw, they hang in the gallery. They didn't make the road trip with me. But you can always get, I've had a good printer down there out of Orlando, and he would make really, really high quality prints for me. And I would take them on the road, and you'd sell prints too. If people couldn't afford the original, then you sell prints. And that was another income stream when you're on the road. 5
years, dude. That's insane. That's wow.
It was trip, man, because I mean, I had my van. I had a Dodge van, and I had it to where once I got my tent set up and got all my artwork put on in the walls, then I had it set up to where it would turn the back into a bed, and my wife and I we would sleep in the back of the van at whatever art show we were at, and had a nice bed in it. So I mean, we fared well. We'd eat at the local restaurants and do the art show.
Was there any art show that really stood out to you as like it was one that you looked forward to on your rotation?
Yeah, I mean, I really, really look forward to the Cedar Key art show. They have an art show down there. It's been ravaged by hurricanes the last 3 years. I feel sorry for those people because I know they got hit hard, but it was a small community there. There was no corporate entities the people owned the property. They just wouldn't let big corporate come in. There was no McDonald's, there was no Wendy's, there was no anything chain there. They had a couple places you could stay, and they were old homes that were fixed up, and it looked like old Florida. And it was just a really, really nice place to be. I love that show. There's another small show in Brooksville that I always really liked just because the setting had nice live oaks and the people were really nice in that area. Never did really make a whole lot of money there, but it was just a really good show. And I think one of my bigger shows was I always did well at Vero Beach. There's a large contingency of wealthy homeowners in that area, and they support the arts.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so I always did that. Those were my money making shows.
And then while this was going on, you had your own exhibit up here that you partnered with, a big shot apparently in the art world, which is crazy how things work out like that. Just opportunity meets that.
Yeah.
When did the kayaking, as all this kind of goes on, when did the kayaking really start to gear up and you had to make a life decision?
About 9 years ago, I was just, I always fish. If I wasn't working in the art gallery or drawing, I'd take my breaks and I'd go fishing. And I still fished a couple of days a week, when I could, maybe 3 days sometimes. But I just kept seeing the game wardens here. Virginia had a program where the game wardens would go down the rivers in kayaks and they would check people's license and make sure the limits were right and sizes were right. And, and I got to talking to those guys, and I think they all had tarpon 120s. And I just loved the fact I could see them guys coming, and it wouldn't take them no time to get to me. And they'd go through the holes that it was hard for me to get to. I'd have to wade to them, So I was always a wade fisher. And got to talking to one of the game wardens, and he steered me to a little shop. And I got my first kayak, and it wasn't a really good kayak, but it got me on the water, and it served its purpose. And then I seen a video of Drew Gregory when he was with Jackson Kayaks. He had designed a kayak called a Coosa. It was a small kayak, and it was about a 10-footer. And he was standing in it, and he jumped up and did a 360 at it. And I told my wife, I said, I want one of those. I'm going to get one. And 2 days later, I had one. And that kind of got me started. And I fished my first tournament, and I won that tournament, and it was a decent payout. And from there, I just started looking for bigger tournaments, more tournaments. And a buddy of mine called me when I was in Florida. I just got back from an art show. I was still doing art shows at that time. And I was in Florida, and he called me and said, hey, there's this thing is called KBF. And he said they're having a national championship, but if you qualify through the Open, you can also fish the championship. Are you interested? And I said, well, sure, why not? So I drove from Florida, met him up there, and I fished that, qualified, and then fished that first championship. And after that, I was done. I never looked back. I was going to do it. So I had to find a balance for a little while between my art and my fishing. And then when the trails started getting more and more tournaments, I hung up my pencil, and and just started fishing full time. I've been fishing full time now for about 7 years. So
going from West Virginia and Rocky Gap, Virginia, you have, I mean, the New River, of course. Smith Mountain Lake is not too far from you, Clater.
James
What
River.
would you consider your bread and butter when it comes to your cultural fishing background? Because I'm assuming Florida is far from that as you could get.
Yeah. Well, I spent some time in Florida when I was real young. I used to fish Rodman over there when I was about 7 or 8, and with my parents, and we'd go over there and we'd fish. And I always loved that area, around Ocala down there, but it wasn't rivers, but my strong suit has always been the fast flowing rocky rivers. I mean, there's something about them. I've been in them all my life, and that's where I feel comfortable, or felt comfortable when I started. But now it's gotten to where I don't care. I mean, there's some lakes that they're not daunting to me anymore. When I first started, fishing lakes was a huge obstacle for me to overcome, because I just never could. I just felt out of place, when I got on a lake. But the more I fish them, the more I learn. And now it doesn't matter. I'll fish lakes, there's some great lakes that I love to fish. Caddo is one of them. I'll never pass up a chance to fish a tournament on Caddo. But the rivers are my bread and butter. I think they got me started. And if a tournament comes to the New River or the Susquehanna or something like that, I don't miss them.
I hope the New River gets back on the rotation. I mean, I know it's not as sexy as the Susky, but it's such a beautiful place.
It is, and there's the problem with the New is that there's no regulations really in West Virginia that promotes a healthy fish population. And a big part of the West Virginia section is rafting.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't get a lot of the love from the DNR, I don't think. I hope they don't get mad at me for saying that, but there are some monster smallmouth in those sections. There are. There's just not as many.
It is weird because if you look at, and if people that are listening to this, if you go, you can Google it yourself, but the New River, I think it was the old record was the West Virginia portion of the New. The Upper Potomac, the Paw Paw section in West Virginia had monstrous smallmouth. But you're right. In the last 20, 30 years, maybe around there, the West Virginia portion of these rivers they don't exist, or you don't have that urge to want to go fish them because the rumor mill is like, oh, it's fishing fantastic.
It's so remote in sections, like when it enters West Virginia there around Glen Lynn, it becomes so remote down through there. There's no way that you can regulate how many fish people are catching and keeping, or what sizes. I mean, unless you have a program like Virginia had where they went down in kayaks, but from there to Bluestone or Hinton, it's a remote stretch. Now, there are some big monster smallmouth in that stretch. I've seen them. I've caught some big ones. I've caught several pushing 22 out of those stretches. But there's just not as many across the board. The bigger fish populations are all from about Glen Lynn up. Mm-hmm. And when you get into the portion from about Pembroke all the way up to Clater Dam, some of that fishing is some of the best smallmouth fishing you're going to find. Now, there are sections, and even in it, that have experienced a downturn, but I've noticed the last 2 or 3 years it's starting to come back, and it's starting to come back pretty strong. On a recent trip up there below around Whitethorn up there, me and my brother, we both had in the mid-90s in there one day, and it was just, man, it was lights out. I caught a 21, I caught a 20. I mean, it was crazy that day. So those fish are in there, and they're starting to come back. But about 10 years ago, it really took a dive. And me and my friends, we go there every year, and we was all discussing, man, what's causing this? What's causing this? And you tend to blame everything that you think, but it's usually just it's humans usually.
I mean, we don't have to be too tiptoey about it. Like West Virginia has had in the past a bad rep with coal and pollution and things of that ilk. If we go back, 20, 30, 50 years, how do you think the water quality is in a lot of your West Virginia places compared to when you were a kid to now?
Well, in the southern part of the state, man, is really where the coal mines have really hampered the development of good fishing a lot. But now there are some local organizations now in the like the Williamson, the Logan areas that have really, really, really done a lot of good for like the upper Guyandot rivers, the Tug Fork. They've gone in there, they've cleaned them up a lot. It's amazing how much they've actually gotten done over there. And actually the fishing is really starting to come back over in those areas. But now as far as the new, it starts right there pretty much around Parisburg. You got the Celanese plant there, and then we used to have a coal-fired power plant there at Glen Lynn, and they've got fly ash pits that they've covered up in those areas. And, it's just, there's no way you can tell me that runoff and stuff isn't some part in some way a part of the problem in that section of river down through there. Glen Lynn power plant is now closed down. It was a coal-fired power plant, but it's shut down. They decommissioned it a few years ago, and but they buried fly ash right along the river. And I know they go in, they put clay down, they put fabric down, they say, "Oh, it's going to be safe," but they don't know that in 20 years that land can move, or they've disturbed it, and just nothing stays the same. But now from about Celanese up, it's not too bad. I mean, you got agricultural areas that you might have to worry a little bit about phosphates or something like that getting into the river, and you got the Army Depot plant up there that sometimes there's some questionable water running in up in that area, but it's not so much, I think, that it's having a huge impact on it. And there again, there's sections. There's a 13-mile section between Clater Dam and Galax, or Foster's Falls, that there's nothing. I mean, it's just, you got the New River Trail that runs down through there, which is the old railroad bed, and there's just nothing down there all the way up into you got Buck Dam, and then you got Billsby Dam, and then not until you get back into around Chestnut Creek, which runs out of Galax, which is about probably 30, 40-mile stretch. There's nothing on that stretch. And there's not a whole lot coming in around Galax. That area is just so clean. When you get past that, you got little towns with no big industry on them, like Independence. And then you get up to around the mouth of Wilson, where you have the line for North Carolina, Virginia right there. I mean, there's nothing up through there. It's pasture. Now we do have a lot of silting problems when you get above Freeze, Virginia. There's been a lot of sand and stuff filling in those areas, but it's still got great fishing, and you can go up there just about any time and catch a nice trophy smallmouth in those areas.
It is interesting because, I think that's a place that they could definitely go back to, because it is the land of the lost. And now maybe the infrastructure is an issue there to be able to hold the tournament. I just think they came at the wrong time of year, personally, when Hobie came 2 years ago now, I believe.
Well, there's some local guys that do tournaments up here who do fairly well. Timmy Dixon, which owns Outdoor Kayak Adventures up there in Freeze, he puts on 2 tournaments a year. One of them is in the spring, one of them is in the fall, and they're great tournaments. I mean, you'll get, I've been up there and fished them that have 50, 60 people in them, and they're all locals, and, you got plenty of river to fish in there. And he puts on a great tournament. I don't know if he's still doing them or not. I haven't fished them in a while because I haven't had a chance. But
I need to get Tim back on because, with he's a great dude. And after what happened with the hurricane and it coming through like that, just to see how he's doing, it's brutal, man.
Yeah, they're trying to get back to normal down there. They've got the bridge open again, but I have seen that water up to the bottom of that bridge, but I've never seen that water coming over the top of that bridge like it was up over the guardrails on top of the bridge, and it ate out both ends of the bridge. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy how much water was coming out of there.
And it shows you
both forks of that river head up in North Carolina, and just right across the mountain. I mean, that whole Rogers Mountain and all that, Mount Mitchell, it runs all down all the way to Asheville. So all that rain hit there too. Banner Elk, all that got hit really hard by the hurricane. But those towns didn't get wiped out like they did right there, around Asheville. They got 30 inches of rain in there.
Insane.
Yeah.
And it shows you how vulnerable our infrastructure is, where that place became like the moon. I'm big in, like, my wife's big into horses and everything. And it went through social media that if you had a donkey or a horse that you could donate just so they could trail pack supplies in. And like, this is in the United States on the East Coast. And we're treating this like Afghanistan. It's just bonkers.
It's the terrain, dude. I mean, if you fish very much in the New River Valley there below the arsenal up there and that whole area, those F-16s, F-22s, F-35s, they're all flying through there because it's the same kind of terrain as Afghanistan through those areas. And that's where they train at. And when you get down around Asheville, you got Mount Mitchell. It's almost, 7,000 feet in there. That terrain is unforgiving. And it's hard to get in and out of there. What roads they had in there, they had to follow the stream beds in order to get in and out. So you can't just cut through the side of a mountain, build every road. You have to follow those stream beds.
Yeah. I mean, I am so grateful that everything was able to get in there. They were able to get internet up. And luckily, you weren't hit as bad. I know, like Bass Geek, where he wasn't hit as bad. It could have been a lot worse. It really could have.
Yeah. I mean, we had a few trees down. There wasn't no really bad flooding here. The wind was a bigger problem here. It knocked the power out for about 2 weeks for a lot of people. But we are here at this building. We're lucky because we're on the same leg that the hospital is on. So cool. It gets restored first. All of our emergency services right down the street here. So we're on that same leg. So when the power goes out, it's the first one to get back on. So we got lucky. I was only without power for a couple of days, I think.
And this building that you're in now is the art museum, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And by the way, guys, if you're there, he has a mural on his ceiling, which looks just absolutely badass. My wife, so you could do it. My wife would not let me put a topo map probably on our ceiling, but that is so cool.
Man, we are not afraid to jump out and do anything here. I swear, it's hard to tell. You come here and it's like, you can't see everything that's in this building with one trip. You see something different every time you come here. I've got a piece out in the hallway that me and my buddy Gary, we done. It's called Basquatch. And it's just a big creature with a big giant fish head, and it's got lures and it's got fish nets and cell phones, and it's everything that you lose when you're fishing is on that piece. And he's about 8 feet tall and paper mache, and we have a lot of fun. That's what we do. We just
that's
have
what it's
fun.
about. That's what it's about. And
Zman come down and did a short documentary on me, and they're blown away by the gallery, and they came down. They started a GoFundMe for the House of Art, which we really greatly appreciated, and it helped us open up another room. And they're awesome, and they just love this place. And they still want to come back. And can we come back? And I'm like, you can come back anytime you want to. But we gave them the grand tour, and it's just, there's so much to see here that you can't take it all in with one trip. You have to keep coming back.
How do you pick what goes into either the art exhibit or the museum piece?
Well, what we do is we try to be an outreach for Appalachian artists here, and we give them a platform to show their work. We teach them how to do a show. They hang their shows, and we have a space set aside for Appalachian artists down there to hang their work, just for art shows. And as far as the wall space is concerned, there's just a handful of artists that actually display in the gallery walls itself. We have about 8 or 9 artists, I think, but mostly we're like we try to teach them how to frame their work, present their work. If they want to go on the road, we can help them with that. And teach them how to, to jury into other art shows. And we try to be a resource for our Appalachian artists. So, and we have other functions. We get out, we're community oriented here. We like to get out, and we'll go out to the park. And we had a couple of years ago, we had a bunch of kids from the local grade school come over, and we painted all the picnic tables and let them just do their thing on it. And that was a lot of fun. And we do a haunted house every year. This school is also the most haunted school in America, according to most paranormal.
What? That is awesome, man. Good Lord.
We hear stuff all the time in here, man. They seem to be friendly, so we don't pay much attention to them.
You have such if you had a biography, you could just leave out the fishing segment, and it was, but it's true. And when you have so much of that going on, that you're passionate about, how do you balance that with being on the road, 12 months out of the year, 8 months out of the year fishing?
Yeah, there's kind of an imbalance there now. I mean, because it's mostly fishing for me right now, and it has been for the last 7 or 8 years. But I come back here, and I still get to go into my studio every now and then, and I still get to see what Gary's creating and the new artists that are coming in, and I still get to be a part of the shows that come up, and so that's good. But I mean, I'm also a musician, so I mean, we get out and play music, and me and my wife.
How long have you been a musician for?
Since I was about 12.
Instrument, a banjo, violin?
Banjo, guitar mostly. Yeah, I can play a bluegrass bass, but it's been bluegrass mostly, but I play other stuff too. Me and my buddy Abby, you know Abby Abundanza?
I know.
So he's a hell of a stick, man. But we started fishing together a few years ago, and he's a country singer, and he's had a few hit the charts, and he got into kayak fishing. Once it gets a hold of you, man, it don't matter who you are or where you're at, you're going to do it. But he's I think he had a couple that charted around 25 or something like that. And
wow,
he's been in the business for a while. But every time him and I go fishing now, if we're staying at the same Airbnb, we always take our guitars with us, and we sit around and play music. We try to get it in everywhere we can get it in, man. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I have a brother who sings and plays guitar, and a brother that plays the mandolin. And he can burn that mandolin up, man. And we get together 2 or 3 times a year, usually on the riverbank, so we can play music and fish too. So,
dude, that is so. I don't know how you've been able to fit all this in. Like,
I never stop. I'm constantly doing something. I never stop.
But that's what you need to do.
It's fun though. I mean, if you can do what you love for a living, I mean, you never really work a day in your life. I can't remember who said that, but there's a lot of truth to it.
There is a lot of truth to that, and never stop learning, whether it's a new craft or whatever.
No, and I've got the support of my wife, we support each other. Anything that if it's something that we feel passionate about, we support each other. So, I mean, having her and on my side helps a lot too. So,
does she travel with you, or does she stay at home?
Sometimes, yeah. I think she made 3 or 4 tournaments this year with me, and I think she's going to go to the Classic with me this year. We got a house. We're going to be fishing Lake Fork this year for the Bassmasters Classic Championship. So she'll be there with me. She went to Murray with me this year, and went to Texas with me. She went to Oklahoma with me. So I try to get her to go as much as I can, but she also is the treasurer and makes this place run.
Of course,
it's hard. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for her to get away when I'm away too. But we work it out, and it's been pretty good for the last couple of years. She's gotten to go with me quite a bit.
How do you, at this point in your career, pick what to do? Because when you look at when kayak fishing first really popped off in its infancy, you had KBF, you had, of course, Hobie. And now it's like you could throw a rock and hit an organization or a tournament. It's insane. How do you pare it down to where you don't feel like you're overwhelmed or you're burning out is probably not the right wording.
Yeah, I love fishing my local clubs. I mean, I think that's where everybody should start out, because you learn so much in those local clubs. And I love fishing them. I don't get to fish them very much. I try to do, one or two tournaments in the clubs, my local clubs, a year, a season. But when I'm picking these organizations to fish, I have to go, since this is my bread and butter, I have to go mostly where the money is.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, fortunately for me, it's grown into something that you can, if you do it right, you can make a living at it. And I couldn't do it without my sponsors, of course. But I never thought, looking back 8 years ago, I never even thought about having a sponsor or something like that, And I have a short list of sponsors that are they're really good to me, and they really, really help allow me to do what I want to do. So hats off to them, because they're a big part of my life doing this. But yeah, I mean, you ever heard the expression "nature abhors a vacuum"?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is when these trails, that they're all going to come and go, and there's going to be some that are around for a long time to come. But when one of these trails drops out, there's always someone there that's going to fill that spot, because there's a need for it. Now, next season we got a new trail coming out, which is a partner trail. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called TKS, and it's you grab a partner and you fish all the tournaments are a partnership. You and your partner, they go and you fish them, and the best each of your 5 fish over a weekend is what they go by. It's called TKS, which is Team Kayak Series, and Gene Jensen is putting that on, and I think it's the only platform out there like that, and I think it's going to be successful. Then you have Drew Gregory started his last year, which is Adventure Kayak Series, or the Kayak Adventure Series. And his did pretty good the first year, and I think this year it's going to get bigger. It's still growing. And then, of course, you have Bass, and then you have Hobie. Word's still out on Hobie. I don't know. I know the company is up for sale. I don't know much about what's going on there, but there's a chance that Hobie might not be around next season. That's not saying that it won't ever be around, but next season I don't know what the new people coming in are going to do next season. So I'm not sure.
That'd be sad. I think it'd be really sad.
Yeah, Hobie, the B.O.S. is a great trail.
Yeah,
it is a great trail. They have great venues, great locations to fish. It was run really, really well, and I really enjoyed fishing those series. So I try to support any series that's coming up if I can. If I can't physically be there because of my schedule, I'll tell people about it and try to promote them best I can.
They need at some point a legit hardcore river smallmouth series where we can just anoint the best river smallmouth angler in the country, and you could hit the Susquehanna, the Shenandoah, the Upper, pretty much everything in the Virginia, Pennsylvania corridor. I was talking to a biologist, it was like 2 weeks ago about that. I think it was Hallaker. And it was just like, it's insane. We have so many smallmouth rivers in this little area, this pocket, that are all really good.
Yeah. That's the thing about West Virginia, man. You notice their anglers, a lot of West Virginia anglers, when they do decide to step out of the box and go somewhere else and fish, they usually do pretty well. West Virginia don't have that many lakes, especially lakes that hold fish like Guntersville or Dale Hollow, we have Stonewall here in West Virginia, which is a decent lake, and we have Summersville, which is a decent lake. But none of those, that really step out and have national notoriety. And so most of these guys, they're river rats, man. I mean, that's where they grow up. That's where the fish are. And we grew up swimming and fishing and eating the fish out of the streams around here. And, when you hit a lake around here, it can be, a lot of them are like the Dead Sea, and then all of a sudden you find yourself on Guntersville and it's like, well, this is easy. I'm catching fish everywhere,
It's like the Ohio angler, the Ohio River angler, so to speak, that vibe.
Same way. Ohio's just, I mean, when you get away from the Great Lakes, Ohio's just not known for its, it's super fisheries. There's just not a lot there. But I think it has its place to have those tough lakes, because if you grow up fishing a tough lake, and then when you get on something that actually does have fish in it, I think it works out for you a lot better.
You definitely need those in the schedule. I mean, we don't necessarily always need like the Sabine for the 80th time, but I can name off some classics, and people might have to pause and think about which one I'm talking about. But if I say the Three Rivers in Pittsburgh, everyone immediately will remember that one forever. It's cool. That grind is interesting, at least to watch other people. Maybe it's catharticism about when we've suffered growing up on a bad place, watching the pros having to deal with it or something.
Yeah.
But on a sad note, it's like the Three Rivers, I think, put a bad taste in people's mouth when it comes to West Virginia fishing opportunities, or that area of the country. Is there a river that you can disclose, not the new, in West Virginia, that is something people should check out because the fishing's pretty decent?
Yeah, I mean, one of the prettiest rivers I've been on, and it's kind of got sections in it where you catch more fish than others, because it's a really popular river with locals. You get a lot of floaters and stuff like that, but there's sections of it where you can get away. Is the Greenbrier. The upper Greenbrier, a lot of people don't really, there's a few of us that know that there's some big smallmouth in the upper Greenbrier once you get past Lewisburg and that area. I've caught decent smallmouth even out of some of the trout streams like the Cranberry and stuff. But man, the Tug Fork is really coming along. You're catching a lot of 3-pound smallmouth out of it right now. When I can remember when that place it was rough, because it had a couple coal spills and it turned black. Coal River's got some pretty good smallmouth in it now. But then again, when you get in those areas, you're pretty much at the whims of how well the coal mines are governed around them, because they get hammered with coal sludge and stuff like that. We haven't had a spill in a while in the coal, so it's starting to come back pretty good. But in the middle of the state, there's some great smaller lakes, like Elk. What's the name of that? Elk. I want to say Elkhorn or something like that.
Elkhorn, Somerville. Morgantown.
Somersville Lake is good. The Upper Gauley has got some decent fishing in it. But when you get in those areas up in there, it's a lot of trout. But I think one of my favorite rivers to fish that I don't get to fish a lot is the South Branch of Potomac.
Dude, the legends of the Paw Paw South Branch area, dude. I want to go up there and actually hit it hard for like a week or something and explore it, because I live in Williamsburg. I live just below Hancock, Maryland. So that stretch down, I fish a lot, but I never really ventured too far up. And it's crazy. Like, it's not what it used to be, but it's so rural and wild. Like, there's not a lot of pressure up there.
Yeah. There's some great musky streams on the Ohio Riverside too, man. Did you see that big muskie that was just caught?
Dude, that thing's a river monster.
55 inches, man. And that comes out of a creek that I have fished several times. And it's just, I mean, you wouldn't think that something like that would be in there. It's just not that big of a creek. And it's got muskie all through it.
You gotten fat on all them stock trout is what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. They got a good food source. But
that's the same thing,
the Gauley below Summersville, it can hold some fish. It's got a decent walleye population. But it is so clean coming out 372 feet down, dude. It's so clean that even plants won't hardly grow in parts of it. It's too clean. There's no nutrients in it. But now when you get above the lake up there in Summersville, and you get in the upper parts of the Elk above Sutton, you're talking about middle of nowhere. And there's some decent smallmouth fishing in that too. I've caught some 3 and 4 pounders up in there. Where else?
Do you guys have a lot of Mad Toms in your river systems, like we have on the Shenandoah?
We do in the new, yeah.
In the new?
Yeah. The news got them pretty good. Just about if you find a can, I mean, it's usually got a Mad Tom in it, pot bottle. If you find a pot bottle or anything that's they can crawl back into, you're going to find them. A lot of people use them, actually.
Why is it? Because I talk to so many river rats on this show. It's always a debate I have with them, Ned rig versus the tube guys. But what's funny is when you ask people outside of smallmouth rivers, it's like the tube is this thing that never exists. And it never got into the zeitgeist, generally speaking, of Bassmaster magazines and all that stuff. Is it just a niche bait, you think, comparatively?
And it didn't used to be. I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I mean, I used to throw a 4 or 5 inch tube for largemouth even, and throw them for smallmouth. I mean, the tube used to be a go-to bait back in the day. But, you know, since the advent of the Ned rig and stuff like that, people have gotten away from them. And but I still got a few buddies that swear by them, and they still throw them. I haven't thrown a tube in 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm catching them on other things, and I just I don't need to go back. Of course, I mean, my favorite is the chatterbait. If I have a chatterbait in my hand on the New River, you catch smallmouth love chatterbaits.
Yeah, that's something that's crazy is how passionate they will hit a chatterbait, and it's hard to explain it to people that don't know it. And I think it's also river system wise, because I feel like certain rivers fish better, like are more power fishy smallmouth versus Shenandoah. Sometimes you can do it, but then you really got to dink and dunk with the tiny jigs, the Ned rigs, the tubes. But Susky example, you can probably power fish that thing to your heart's content. Yeah,
I mean, in the New, I think I have 4 baits that I just absolutely love to throw in the New, and the chatterbait, of course, is one of them. But I love throwing a shaky head in there too, because I mean, you can really get on a shaky head, and the plopper. And I love throwing a spinnerbait when the river is up and running. I love it when that water gets a little bit brown and murky and got about maybe a foot or less of visibility. You can take a spinnerbait over there and just absolutely wear them out, because you know where they're going to be. They're going to pull up next to a log, or, you know, they're going to hang tight to the bank. And that spinnerbait, you can just run it. It might be hard to get to sometimes, but I mean, when it's really running, I think some of my favorite times are, you know, when they're pushing about 3,000, 3,500 at the dam up there, cubic feet per second is usually about normal. I like to fish it when it gets up to like 10 and 12 and 14,000, and it's moving. It's up a few feet, and they're all pushed up against the banks. I've gone over there when they were pushing 30,000, and it was in minor flood stage. And I was down in Narrows, and I was taking a spinnerbait and fishing garbage cans and picnic tables in the campgrounds down there and catching 4-pound smallmouth. So, it's crazy. They'll come out of that current and they'll pull right up next to anything. I mean, it's like turning out the lights. First thing you're going to do is you're going to go to a wall. They just need to orient themselves. So you rake it close to get a big thumping blade, like a number 4 or number 5. Black and blue or brown and black or something like that, and just work at those logs and behind the trees, flooded timbers, and garbage cans, and anything you can throw that's obstructing the water. They're going to be stuck to it.
That's crazy. Is there a river that you haven't fished yet in this area that you really want to get your teeth into?
Man, I've fished just about everything. You know, I landed on the New, so you know where my favorite place is.
Yeah.
I guess, no, I can't think of anything right off the bat. Actually, I'd like to spend more time on the Shenandoah. That's one river that I haven't really explored much. I mean, I fished the North Fork and a little bit of the South Fork of the Shenandoah, but I've never really fished a lot of the Shenandoah. I wouldn't mind getting some more time in on it.
She's coming back.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
I grew up there, and I still fish there a bunch. Our MVKBA event last year, I think it took 90 inches to win off the main stem, which was crazy.
Yeah. See, I've never been on the main stem down there.
Yeah, I mean, dude, because I lived in Loudoun County, and so I remember as a kid, like, it was dead. That's when the DuPont like spill happened a couple years before, and it was if you catch a 10-incher, it's amazing. And so the fact that you're catching 90 inches now to win is unheard of.
Yeah, that's awesome actually, because I mean it went through that poor river, man. It's gone through some stuff, man.
It has. It really has. But I mean, with that on the rise, they're catching 23 to 24 inch smallmouth out of the upper Potomac below Harper's Ferry now because the DWR stocked it with smallmouth for 5 years. So the smallmouth fishing right now in the state, it just feels like it's hitting its stride. I mean, the James, the Shenandoah, the upper Potomac, the Susky being what it is. I just wish more of these organizations would be like, this is a really cool destination. Let's just not go to Kentucky Lake 38 times. Let's go to some of these cool smallmouth rivers. Yeah.
Problem I think a lot of these organizations have with rivers is that they're hard to manage. They're a little more dangerous. You got a lot of people who follow these the big trails, or most of them are lake fishermen, and a lot of them come over from the boat world. They don't have a lot of experience on these rivers. So it has to be a river that's big enough to hold a decent amount of people, and it has to be docile enough to where safety isn't the main issue. A few years ago when Hobie had their last one, I know they picked an area of the New that it kind of threw me for a loop, because part of the gorge was in it.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And so I immediately spent about 6 or 7 hours going through all the launches, all the rapids, and how I classified them, and the dangers, and where you can portage. And I went through and did all that because I was worried somebody was going to get hurt. And I sent it to Hobie, and they posted it for people to read. So, it has to be like the Susky is a very forgiving geographically. I mean, there's a couple spots in it, McKee Falls, that you can get hung up in, or, a lot of rock tops in certain areas, but it's fairly navigable from Sunbury all the way down to Harrisburg. There's not a lot in there that you can get in a lot of trouble with. Rivers like that have that kind of geography and topography is going to be the areas where the bigger organizations are going to try to cling to, because they're easier. The slower moving rivers in the south, like the Coosa down there, is another good river to fish. I mean, there's some big spots in there. Some of the rivers, the Tennessee River, of course, it's got every lake in the country that everybody wants to fish down there, from Watts Bar all the way down to Gunnersville to Pickwick, and that's Kentucky, on the Kentucky side. But those rivers don't have that rocky, clean water feel that like we got here in West Virginia and Maryland, and there's a few rivers in Ohio that are smaller that if you did I think Drew's going to do one. I think it's on his schedule for this season. I think they're going to go to Springfield. And there's a cluster of lakes, and there's a cluster of rivers in there that actually, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at how well that area is going to fish this year. I think it's going to do pretty good.
Yeah. Like Wisconsin, Ohio, Niagara River. Like, I think there's what kayaking did that was so cool is it put different places on the map, in my opinion. Like the Susquehanna River, everyone knew about it, but when National Kayak Trails went there, it popped off. And I was really hoping that happened with the New. They hit it at a bad time. They come again, they could show it off. But I think there's so many places like that a kayak organization could highlight. And I get that there's a lot of other political issues that are behind the scenes with that, but it's sad because there's so many communities that could definitely benefit from a big kayak tournament organization coming there.
I mean, well, when we did the bass up there was 200 anglers in it, like 208 anglers. That's a big boon to any economy in those areas there, those little small towns and stuff. They experienced, a little uptick in revenue, and it happens everywhere we go, especially even our local clubs. I can remember when MSKA first started out, we had one season where our average turnout was 149 anglers. They were the largest club in the United States at the time as far as turnout. They were bigger than KBF, what KBF was drawing. And when we roll into those little towns along those rivers, I mean, I mean, we're eating at all the places that little restaurants, you know, and we're staying at the motels and the campgrounds, and yeah, it's a big boon for these small areas. That's why, you know, we need these local clubs. You know, we need them. It's not just for the anglers, but it's also for the small towns around these areas where we like to fish.
No, we need them. I mean, without them, again, I think we're also getting more regional as the economy is in its whatever you want to call this limbo.
Yeah.
Not everyone can go fish nationally and drive to Texas. But then on the
Right.
same token, if the money's so good regional, why would you? Like in a lot of
Yeah.
situations, if you have a wife and kids and you can make just as much money staying in a region compared to driving, why wouldn't you?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The thing that's happening though is that everybody knows I look for someone to take up a actual pro trail. I think it's coming. I think it's I don't think it's overdue. I think that, you know, in the past 3 or 4 years, it's probably grown enough. The sport's grown enough to where you might be able to have you know, maybe 30 to 50 people that would do just a pro trail. And those purses are going to be way bigger. You know, as these purses grow, that's what tends to get people out of the local clubs to travel. And if they win one decent one, then it might fund the next one. You know, that's the way it was with me. I won a couple decent ones. I won the TOC and on Ouachita, and that was $20,000. So I mean, that pretty much set me up for got my equipment and got me a couple sponsors and got me rolling. And but also, I mean, these guys that West Virginia in this area is such a depressed area in spots that, you know, monetarily these guys got to work. You know, as much as they like to fish, they have to work. You know, they have to go out, and because they'll starve if they don't. And you can't just rely on local monies to get you anywhere. You might survive off of it for a while, but you still got to be good at what you do. There's a lot of sticks out there that'll take your money, you know. But I'll tell you right now, if some of these guys that I know that fish these local clubs, if they ever decided to step out, everybody better watch out, because there's some sticks, buddy, in them local clubs. I'm telling you, there's some good sticks.
What is Appalachia to you culturally?
It's I think it's a cultural anomaly. We've hung on to the culture around here. We got our own music, we got our own food, you know, we got our own traditions, and that you don't find anywhere else in the world. I mean, you might find something a little bit like it in another spot, but it's, you know, the Appalachians were a mishmash of different nationalities, and you know, I know that here where I live now, even way back in the early 1900s, there was, you know, we had a African American population here. We had, you know, a lot of Italians. We had a lot of Welsh and Scotch Irish, and it was a truly, and this area was a melting pot for coming in and working the mines and stuff. And all those families a lot of them still have roots here, and a lot of those nationalities are still here. But they don't talk like Italians, and they don't talk like African Americans. They don't talk like the norm. You know, we all have that slang. You know, we all have that drawl, and we have our, you know, a lot of us have our own sayings and vocabulary. You know, we're different, but you know, it's a kind of a different way of life here in the mountains, and we're proud of it. You know, we're proud of most of it anyway. But we get depicted as, you know, hillbillies and you know, stupider than the rest of the world or whatever, but we're not. And they can say what they want about us, but we're not that dumb. I got a buddy. His name is Rick, and I mean, if you were sitting next to him talking, he wears bibbed overalls, and you know, he talks like like a hick. He's got his own vocabulary pretty much. He calls, pigeons slum chickens, and he pulls them out of his hat, and you'd think he was the dumbest person in the world. And that dude can absolutely tear a trigonometry book up.
Mm.
I mean, he's an engineer. He's a machinist, and algebra, you name it. I've seen him do it, and it's just, we get written off by the way we talk because people know where we're from, and people assume that we're not that well educated or whatever. And I think it's funny, really, a lot, because it surprises a lot of people when they come to this area and they see this building, for example. We get people in from New York and Pittsburgh and all over the place, DC, Richmond area, and they come in here and they're like, we don't have anything like this where we're at. And they're like,
the culture is so deep and so long.
Yeah. How do you guys do this here? And it's just a passion,
Because the culture, I mean, again, like I've just reiterated for people at home, like you're talking 200 to 300 years of culture in this area versus Richmond and DC. Like they imported the culture, they brought it to them. Whereas what you did is you just took all the culture that was already there and just brought it under a roof.
Yeah, it's a different way of life. I mean, it's not a lowland way of life, and there is a difference. I mean, we rely on different food sources. I mean, we were big on raising our own food, canning. Even when I was growing up, I mean, we only went to the store a couple times a month, and it was just for meal and flour. And we bought 50-pound sacks, but we had our own chickens, we had hogs, and we butchered cows, and that's how you grow up in this area back in the day. And our music is, I mean, it's different. I mean, you don't find bluegrass music and this hill music. I mean, they started out on dulcimers, and there's all kinds of different facets of it. But it's, when bluegrass come along, the Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, I mean, those areas were the proving grounds for bluegrass. And it's just, now you got Billy Strings, and it's just, you got people like that are putting it on the main stage out in front of everybody, and then people are falling in love with it all over again. And, you had people like Dan Tominski, who did the Ralph Stanley song for "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And, it goes through phases where you get those guys who bring it to a national scene and people fall in love with it all over again. And it's actually growing right now. Bluegrass is growing, and some of the bands that you see that are playing this stuff, it takes a lot more talent than you think to make a good bluegrass band. Oh, yeah. Some of them have degrees from Juilliard, even. I mean, they just fall in love with it. I mean, you got banjo players like Bela Fleck from Venezuela. I mean, he grew up playing classical, and his instrument was a banjo. And that dude is on fire. It's a worldwide music now. Japan, bluegrass is huge.
Really?
Oh yeah, they love it. They love it over there. Germany. If you go into any town with a banjo on your back in Germany, you won't have to pay for nothing. They love it over there.
As we're going way off fishing topic, but I'm just fascinated as hell by it. No, but I love this, and it's my show. We'll talk about it because I think it's cool. Bluegrass, banjo. Did the guitar evolve into a banjo? How did the banjo become into existence?
Banjo was actually, I mean, a lot of people, historians, they say it came from Africa. Some of the instruments they had in Africa. I mean, I've seen what they're saying it came from, but I can't hardly wrap my head around it because it looks like a really far stretch. But I mean, there are some similarities, but they say it actually evolved out of Africa. And most of the bluegrass we sing today, a lot of it is from African-American slave music. A lot of it comes from that part of our culture, and it also comes from later in bluegrass's history. It comes from a lot of blues were mixed in with it, and it just became its own it became its own thing, you know. I mean, of course, the guitar's been around forever. I mean, some form or another. I mean, the lute, I think the lute was probably one of the first types of guitars, I guess. But the banjo, it's got its roots in Africa, from what I understand about it.
Okay.
It's hard to go from a gourd with a string on it to a big hunk of metal that weighs about 25 pounds that hangs around your neck.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to see that transformation or that evolution when you're looking at it side by side.
We're looking at it so like pulled out in time, not over 200, 300 years. I'm looking at like the evolution of jazz too.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Exactly. But if you start doing bluegrass, I mean, if you start looking through bluegrass songs and stuff, there's a lot of African American influence on the types of songs that they're singing. It's a lot of songs about legends, and a lot of song about working, a lot of song about God, a lot of song about the environment. It's just it encapsulates our way of life here in the mountains. That's just what it is.
Yeah. And it's the cultural like folk songs. Like, I mean, that's why you have so many like legends like the Mothman or the Snallygass or all those things. Cause it's just, you have these isolated pockets, and this is how you did it. You told stories throughout time.
Yeah. We got a Mothman here in the gallery, actually. He's about 6 foot tall. He's got wings, and
I got to come down.
You need to come here.
You're selling me.
I'm telling you, man, it's a place you just got to experience it to believe.
I mean, dude, on that note, he's an artist, a painter, and a musician. Oh, and he also fishes a lot. Jody, I really appreciate you coming on today. Is there anything I can promote or we can give a shout out to here?
Yeah, man, just Gary Bowling's House of Art. I mean, give us a shout out on our Facebook page, which is Gary. I think we got hacked, so I think it now might be the House of Art at the Ramsey School. This school's in Ripley's, believe it or not, too.
Really?
Yeah, it's a 5-story building, but it has 7 ground floor entrances. There's a ground floor entrance on each level. It's built right into the side of the mountain.
That's crazy.
And we got a flag on Everest. The Ramsey School has a flag on Everest.
I can't, guys. If he doesn't have a biography book at some point, there's just an injustice in the world. I'm going to link all of his stuff in the episode description. Go check out this art museum. Go support him. I mean, again, I really appreciate you coming on the show, guys. Please go support. Dude, I
tell you, man, I've never been on a podcast where we just talked about anything and everything, and I really appreciate it. I've had a good time.
No, you're welcome, man. It's so cool to get people on and kind of listen to their story. And good God, dude, you are a legend. Anyway, we'll get out of here.
I'll tell you about getting attacked by an alligator.
We will save that for next time, and we might be talking it off air, but we're done here. Like, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.